there was a big explosion in their laboratory.
Man, this is pretty sketchy.
5 people died.
This is where they tried out the dynamite,
including Alfred's little brother Emil.
He tossed it in here. What's up, everyone? It's Husqvarna, the Swedish guy that's beyond annoying. I'm back with another hood history. I can't get out of here. Today I'm gonna take you to the first factory of dynamite ever made. That's insane. And I'm also gonna take you to Daddy Dynamite's buried body. I know it sounds weird, but I might do that as well. So Sweden has a lot of famous people, especially related to music, like ABBA, Avicii, Max Martin. That guy has probably done 90% of your favorite songs. The last 10%, they belong to me. I've done them all. Oops. But that's awkward. But there is a guy that's a lot more famous than all of them combined. And this guy has never touched a piano in all his life. He maybe blew some up, but he's never played on one. I call him Daddy Dynamite, DD. But most people, they know him as Alfred Nobel. He's the guy that invented dynamite. If you only speak Minecraft terms, it's called TNT. And I'm gonna be honest, I just thought that he was some old man that just made something blow up, basically. I'm super bad at history and usually I don't give a fuck, but this guy has a lot of interesting stuff, apparently. And I've done my research. I know absolutely everything about this man. And I even found this very old map of the first dynamite factory in Sweden and in the whole world. And that's where we are heading right now. So, who is this guy? Alfred Nobel. Well, Alfred was born, just like me, in Stockholm. And you might be thinking, this dude is old as he must be born in the city center of Stockholm. But this is hood history. How does that make sense? Well, the factory that we are going to is not in the city center. It's in the hoods. So that's how that makes sense. And just like many other entrepreneurs, he was born dirt poor. They didn't have anything. So when Alfred was 9, he and his family, his mom, his dad, his smaller brother Emil, they all had to move to St. Petersburg in Russia. That's how poor they were. And the reason they had to move was that Alfred's father got a job in Russia. And this is where it gets interesting. So Alfred's father was also a mad scientist. They moved to Russia because Alfred's father helped the Russian army develop underwater mines for the Russian army. And fortunate for them, business was booming a lot of years. So Alfred even got a private teacher at home that taught him to speak Russian, French, and I believe Spanish. But then unfortunately his father ran out of business. So in 1842 they had to move back to Sweden. And once they got back to Sweden, Alfred became obsessed with nitroglycerin, which is a liquid that's very, very unstable. It can blow up by just the wrong temperature and so on. It's very unstable. And this made nitroglycerin basically unusable because it was too unsafe to handle. So Alfred really wanted to make some kind of explosive with nitroglycerin that's safe to use and safe to handle and safe to store. So in 1863, Alfred, his brother Emil, and his father, they worked hard to develop an explosive that's safe to use. And that's when they made explosive oil out of nitroglycerin. And unfortunately, 1 year after this, there was a big explosion in their laboratory in central Stockholm, where 5 people died, including Alfred's little brother Emil. And this was a very sad accident caused by the explosive oil. That's a bit more stable than pure nitroglycerin, but apparently not stable enough. So this led to a couple of things. First of all, Alfred wasn't allowed anymore to have a laboratorium in the city of Stockholm. And that's why we are here. So after the tragic accident in the laboratorium, they were only allowed to do their tests in Mälaren on a floating boat. But after about a year of using a flatboat as a laboratorium, they were finally allowed to move the lab south of Stockholm to Vinterviken, which is the place we are right now. And this is where Albert built one of the largest factories for explosives. And the first year of being here, Albert made 16,000 kilograms of nitroglycerin. And the year after, in 1866, Albert created the first dynamite. In Sweden, we basically save all old stuff in a big archive. And after some digging, I actually found a map of this place. And it seems like most things are untouched, except some small buildings, like buildings for horses and so on. So the building you guys can see in front of me is 100% untouched. They might have redone the roofing and so on, obviously. But this was actually one of the largest buildings in this factory area. And inside here they made sulfuric acid. I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation, but yeah, it's a hard word, come on. So it's insane to think that this building has been here in the exact same spot since 1865. And Albert has walked inside of here. And Albert also created the dynamite inside of here that revolutionized everything. But if we look at the map, we can see this house. It's very long, it's hard to miss on the map. But we can also see another house on the map. And it's this one. And I got some help to translate the map as well. And this is apparently the storage for a special kind of salt that they use for a lot of stuff, but it's basically salt. So this old building was just completely filled with salt. And we can actually see that this house is untouched with the roofing. We can see parts of the wooden roof, and now it's a place where you can rent paddle boards. So I believe that most people walking around here with their dogs and so on, they have no clue that this was where Albert invented the dynamite. So let's see if there's any other buildings here on the map that's still here. So marked on the map, I think this house is still here. It looks old. I think this is a new house, I'm pretty sure. But I think this house is still here. Let's see if we can go further on. And this one as well, it's marked with the Stockholm symbol. So all these houses are untouched as well. It's hard to see on the map what exactly the purpose of these buildings were, but I think one of these are the laboratorium that Albert sat and used his full brain power. So I've never been here before, which is pretty amazing. You can really explore some new stuff, even in the places you have lived your whole life. So here we can see a huge chimney. So I suppose one of these buildings were a factory for something. I think, according to the map, they created salt here, the salt that they had the storage building for right over there. But that's just my guess, so it's pretty hard to tell from the old map. Yeah, so over there apparently there are some pits left from Albert testing the dynamite for the first time. So of course we have to go there. Unfortunately I can't access the place by road, and there's a lot of people here even though it's an odd time. So I'll have to do the walk of shame with my helmet all the way there. So let's go. So here we are, Nobel's explosion pits, you could say. This is where they tried out the dynamite. And apparently in 1868 there were 2 big accidents here. So they actually had to move this factory somewhere else. So they started in the city, then they got to do it on the boat, and then they got to do it here, and then they got to do it somewhere else. So dealing with explosives are not an easy thing. So this is where they just, I guess they just threw in the dynamite here and tried it out. Man, this is pretty sketchy. Wait, oh my god. I've said Albert the whole video because I have been thinking of Albert Einstein. His name is Alfred Nobel. So this is where Alfred made the first dynamite. He tossed it in here. So yeah, it's so cool that this is still left to explore. I've heard that people hosted some raves here, which is also wild. So let's see what's over here. People think I'm crazy walking around here with a helmet like I'm scared of the explosions or something. I'm just exploring. So a funny thing with Alfred is, not only did he create the dynamite that was revolutionary, he was also a very good salesman. Because after he made the dynamite, he traveled the whole world and sold the idea of using dynamite to make tunnels for trains and so on. So he was a great salesman. But of course, to be a good salesman, you have to have a good product, and dynamite was the shit back then. It was super safe to use. You could store it in hot environments, cold environments, anything. So basically what he did is he mixed the nitroglycerin with some sort of sand that made the fluid become like some sort of dough. He then formed it and connected it to a fuse, and that's the dynamite. And he also invented the fuse cap that was needed for the dynamite. So he also has patent on the fuse cap and also the dynamite. And here's the memorial sign for Alfred Nobel. And I would say that the moment he invented dynamite, that's where everything became interesting about his history, including the fact that he today has a fortune of almost 6 billion Swedish crowns, and this is like 120 years after his death, and he is still a very rich man. But let's talk more about that. And the reason this fortune belongs to Sweden, even though he died in his home in France, where he lived for 23 years before his death. So after inventing the dynamite, Alfred moved abroad. So he left Sweden and he moved to Paris, the central of Europe. He lived there alone. He never had a wife. I'm not sure if he had many friends, but as far as I could tell, he spent most of his life writing letters and so on. So I suppose the letters had to be sent to someone. I'm not sure. But he lived in Paris until he got banned to be there. So they said, Alfred, we think that you are spying on us, blah, 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 blah. You have to move. So then he moved to Italy instead, but he still had the home left in Paris. So after living in Italy for quite some while, he got banned to live there as well. For what I believe is the same reason he got banned or kicked out of France. So what he did is, at this point of life, he was very interested in gunpowder. And I think he also made some kind of gunpowder that is the most famous gunpowder that's used for weapons and so on. So what he did is he actually moved to Sweden, to a cannon factory in Karlskoga. So he bought a house there with 3 horses as well. But 3 years after moving, he unfortunately passed away from age. And he left a will that I think made him even more famous than inventing the dynamite. The will stated that he wants all his money, the fortune that he has gathered from selling dynamite, and then have the interest of that given back to inventors, which is very nice of him. But there was a problem. So when he died in the late 18th century, he left a fortune of 33 million Swedish crowns. It might not sound that much in today's value, but damn, that was very much money back then. And that's the same fortune that has been invested in stocks and all kind of financial things that is now valued to be about 6 billion Swedish crowns. So the problem was he had 3 homes. One in Sweden that he has only lived for the last 3 years of his life. He had 1 home in Italy, and he had 1 home in Paris. And when he passed away, he was in Italy. So it made stuff very complicated. Italy said straight away, it's fine. You guys take the money, who cares? France, on the other hand, they said, that's a lot of money. We can take the money, we can take it. So they almost took all the money until one of Alfred's friends started to fight for the will to be applied in Sweden instead of France. So first he tried alone. They took it to Supreme Court, blah blah blah, but that didn't work. So what he did is he hired a Swedish lawyer that took the thing in his own hands. And this Swedish lawyer, he studied the laws of France very, very thoroughly until he found one specific sentence in the law that could be used against them. And this law in France, it stated that a man's real home is wherever he has his horses, which in this case was in Sweden. So that's why Alfred Nobel was buried in Stockholm, right over here. And there's even someone who left some flowers for the dynamite man himself, Alfred Nobel. So this is a monument to never forget the man who invented dynamite, but also the 354 other things that he invented during his lifetime. There is one thing I've learned from this that I will take with me my whole life. A man's real home is wherever he has his motorcycles. Hope you guys liked the second episode of Hood History. I even took my bike to a graveyard. I'm pretty sure he would be happy for this episode of Hood History. I really hope so. Remember to follow my Supermotard playlist on Spotify if you like some good music while riding. I keep it updated all the time with some very nice music. See you guys in another episode of Hood History.